And greetings and welcome to the QCast. This is season 3, episode 21. And folks, let's just cut right to it. This is the greatest time of the year if you're a Division 3 basketball fan. Men's basketball, women's basketball, best time of the year without question, because we're starting to get a sense of the picture of the tournament. We're starting to think about brackets and matchups and Pool C. And because of that, it was a great time to touch back with Sara Quatrocky, the chair of the Men's Basketball National Committee. And Sara, first of all, we realize that we have a little matchy situation
Yeah,
going on. That means we're
yeah,
synced up. We must be on the same page. Sara, how the heck
yes.
are you doing?
I'm doing great. It has been an exciting couple weeks. Our committee is like back together. Um, Lots of group chats going on, lots of basketball watching. Um, I got a big trip this weekend to watch some big D3 basketball and see, some of my good friends that I've met along this journey of mine being on the committee for 5 years. It just seems like I started this yesterday, but it has been, a big chunk of my career that I'm really proud of. And so, we're just rolling along. And so, next week, really starts our first official published rankings. And so I know there's a lot of people out
Yeah.
there really excited about that to see what we're going to do. I'm sure we're going to get into that. Just where, what we're the foundation that we're going to set for this year's rankings and tournament, and how we're going to look at teams' resumes and stuff like that. And there's just some really good basketball being played right now. And a lot of these conferences are starting their like second round of play.
Right.
And so it's just a really good time to be a basketball fan. And I know there's a lot of us. I know I'm in a different position because I'm not a coach. And so I think I can enjoy it a little bit more. Whereas I know we have a lot of coaches on our committee that they have to coach their team and
Right.
also have this committee role. And so I think that's very hard for them. And so I kind of feel like I kind of have the best job. I can watch a little bit of all these games every night. And I also don't have to prepare my own team. And so it's kind of nice to be in that role as well.
Now you know how it is to be like a D3 Hoops Twitter person. We can
Yeah.
say whatever the hell we want.
Yeah.
I can post a bracket. I posted one today.
I
It does
saw, yeah.
it doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
right. So that's, I think we're kind of synced up on that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a great world.
Yeah.
I think your trip is, you're going to go to what I would call God's country. I think you're going to the Chicago area. You're going to see maybe a little Wheaton basketball, a little Rochester. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, one of the things we're really proud of in our committee is over the past 5 years, we've really elevated the way that we've evaluated officials. We have our national coordinator of officials, Jim Haney. He has really kind of taken over the way we evaluate officials on a national level. And so he and I have worked really well together over the past couple of years to make sure that we're evaluating officials all over the country, that we are making sure that we get the best officials in the tournament, because that's really important, right? That we're giving the best officials the chance to advance in the tournament as well. And so we've really done this officials evaluation program as well. And so Jim and I have become really close. He told me he was going to Chicago. And so for this big weekend of basketball, when he was, here in Maryville, evaluating our officials for a big weekend that we were here playing Emory and Barry. And so I was like, those are a couple of my, best friends in the business, right? And Mike Shower, and Luke, he's our, vice chair this
Right.
year. And so I'm just going to kind of tag along. I'm going to see his process kind
Right.
of come to fruition. And also too, there's going to be, I would suspect maybe some, you know, uh, regional first weekend games being played there. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of officials in that area. And it's really just good to kind of cross our T's, dot our I's, be on the same page. Because, when we're kind of in that war room, in Indianapolis, I really help with all of that as well, with Jimbo. And, we pick our officials for the weekend and where we're sending them. And, we take a great deal of pride in putting together a really good tournament. So that's what we're doing this weekend.
That's
And I get
cool.
to see a couple of my good friends and watch them play. I've never seen Mike play. So this will be a really cool experience for me as well.
You should have had Jim there a few weekends ago at Wheaton. Yeah, if my school had a little better winning percentage, it wasn't .500. I might send Jim a
Yeah.
video for him to check out. But I'm just going to leave
Yeah.
that there. I think that
Yeah.
ship has sailed.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, Sarah, great time of year. We're doing this now because the first ranking comes out
Yeah.
Tuesday. So the rest of the way, every Tuesday, we're going to get regional rankings. The first one, as we know,
I
is
know.
alphabetical. And so make sure I'm saying this right. The reason that we need to do it alphabetical is because you're missing the regionally ranked opponent criteria. Until you have rankings, you
Yep.
don't have rankings. And
Mhm.
therefore you do it numbers based, winning percentage, you use the strength of schedule. I assume you would use the like common opponents, head to
Yep.
head, everything but RROs, right?
Yep.
And then you'll
Correct.
come up with an alphabetical. Let's stress that again. When people see the list, there's no need to freak out. If there's a
No,
weird order, it's
no,
alphabetical, correct?
correct. We're just really focusing on getting the teams correct, making sure that we're getting the teams correct this first week, because that will matter a great deal, especially since we're ranking less teams than we have in the past. Last year we ranked 10 teams that, in some of these regions we're ranking 10 teams. We're only ranking 7 teams. And every region except for region 2, we're ranking 6 teams. Because of the ratio. And so we have to make sure that we get these teams right. We did a practice this past week with our committee, and it was so clear that we needed to do it was very clear. Alphabetical rankings are the way to go. We're missing a very
Yeah.
clear piece of this puzzle. And even this past week, I know there's a lot of talk. Well, why don't you guys just release your practice rankings as the alphabetical? Well, there's I think it will even help this next week of play just to have more data.
Right.
Because it was still very hard on Monday when we were doing rat calls, the practice rat calls, and our practice national committee call on Tuesday. There's just still there's like sometimes there's might be 3 more games for teams
Right.
between now and Sunday when all that data gets pushed. So we're really just hoping on Tuesday to we'll get the teams right. That's what we're focused on, and then we'll get those rankings published the following week.
So every Tuesday, and again, it seems like last year Mike Shower went out of his way to talk about this alphabetical thing, and then they came out and we still had people that were asking about the order being odd. And so
Yeah, and
I'm
that's
wanting
not
to,
a
it's
yeah.
alphabetical,
Yeah,
right?
it's
I don't know.
alphabetical, and it's definitely not just a men's basketball thing. All the sports are doing this. All the fall sports did this. We're just continuing to do this. And Mike Shower always said it best: you can't make chocolate chip cookies, without chocolate chips, right? So you got to have all your ingredients. So we will lock those teams in next week on Tuesday, and then that will generate those RROs, and that's just really important. So we will focus on getting the correct teams in those rankings. So alphabetical.
Alphabetical. Now
Alphabetical.
let's just work through this. Let's take it a
Yeah.
level deeper to
Okay.
stress the
Okay.
alphabet. So, Mrs. Chairperson,
Yes.
Region 1, I'm going to make up 2 teams. I'm going to
Okay.
make up 2 teams, and I want you to tell me on Tuesday
Yeah.
the order that they would be in. I'm just going to
Okay.
give you 2.
Okay.
Hamilton, which starts with an H,
Mhm.
and Middlebury, which starts with an M. Which order would you have those in on Tuesday?
H would go first.
Hamilton would be ahead of Middlebury, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you another region.
Okay.
Case Western Reserve. This is Region 7. Case Western Reserve and Mount Union. Which team would be higher?
Case
Case
Western.
Western Reserve.
Yeah.
So that is an important exercise that I
Yes.
just took the chair through for
Mm-hmm.
everyone to stress that it's alphabetical. Now,
Mm-hmm.
also, I'd like to ask you this. I thought, what kind of hard hitting questions are there regarding this? And I found one.
Okay.
So let's think of this one. St. Joseph, Connecticut. St. Joseph.
Okay.
do you go by SAINT Saint or the ST? There's a big difference because let's
Yeah,
say that you were ranking Salem State and
yeah.
St. Joseph. It's different. So how do you resolve that?
So actually, that might be a trick question
Oh man.
because they might be in our system as University of.
Oh, okay. So that's a good
You
question.
might have got me. Might have got me there. So they might be under you. Might
Okay,
be
that
under
I'm
you.
glad we covered this. So that could be alphabetical
But
interview.
I do know that they are not ST period in our system. So I believe they would be if they we don't count University of, then we would spell out Saint. I do
Okay.
believe they
I
are.
know in the mileage calculator, which I was all over today, it's SAINT, and that's
Yeah.
what struck this
Yep.
brilliant question that I'm having. So really, guys, this is just a way to say
Yeah.
it's going to be alphabetical Tuesday,
Very
and then
alphabetical.
from there we're going to get order. We can beat up the order. We can take pot shots at the committee.
Yep.
It's going to be great, but we really can't do that too much on Tuesday
Yeah.
because it's alphabetical. Now,
Correct.
let's talk, Sarah, about your structure. There's 10 regions, just like last year, and you have a RAC, a regional advisory committee for each of the 10 regions,
Yep.
and each region has is it called a chair of each region?
Yeah, and so that's us. That's our national committee members serve as the
Gotcha.
chairs of those racks. And then we set those meetings up with our regional advisory committees to serve as a moderator for those regional advisory calls and walk those committees through the rankings for each of the regions. Those regional advisory committees then vote every Monday after the call. We collect the votes, and then as chair, so I would then take that information and present it to the national committee on our national call. And so if there's any discrepancies or if there's something I don't necessarily 100% agree with, or I think we need to make we need to look at something as a national committee, I would then present it when it's my turn, to present. And so we just kind of go through region by region. I get all of actually all of us committee members Monday night, usually late afternoon, Monday, early evening, get all of the data from all of the regions that come in. And so I obviously prepare a little bit more. So I'm ready for those calls. Go through each of the regions to see, where some of the big discussions are going to be leading up into this week's practice
Right.
call. We just, made a set a foundation. Okay, here's what we're going to get out of this call today. We're going to set our foundations as a committee, what's important to us, how we're going to evaluate, what's some of our big, foundational pieces of evaluating criteria. How are we going to remain consistent throughout regions? Because not all of our regions are they're not the same.
Right.
You
Right.
know that. I think a lot of people I see on Twitter, you all know that as well. The competition's not the same, the data is not the same. And so, but how can we evaluate the same? How can we remain consistent throughout region to region? Because then when we start, for instance, evaluating teams across regions, when we start doing top 16 and start evaluating on more of a national level, we have to keep that consistency the same,
Right.
like how we're evaluating the criteria, so that we can then use that, because our criteria is so regionalized that
Right.
we just have to remain consistent with how we're evaluating a resume, if that makes sense.
It does. And so
Yeah.
basically your structure is you've got these 10 leads of the 10 racks that become the national committee.
Mhm.
And you also wear a couple hats there because you're over region 6, and like Luke is over his region.
Yeah.
But you guys both have that other, the chair and the vice chair duties as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
So that's very helpful and makes tons of sense. Um, so are you good if I throw some questions at you? I asked
Yeah.
some esteemed colleagues, is what I'm going
Yeah.
to say. These
Sure.
are AKA random Twitter people, actually not random. These are all people that care deeply about the
Yeah,
process, and they have tons of good questions. And I think I'm going to throw those at you if that's cool with you.
let's go. Yeah.
Flight expectations and budget. I think that this is always a big deal. I think the
Yeah.
question was, do you have a budget where it's like, hey, committee, you have this many flights for the whole darn tournament? Or is it more just an expectation that you're creating a bracket that minimizes flights as much as possible? There's a big difference there. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, it's the latter. It's an expectation that we try to minimize the flights. They don't give us an exact number. So it's
Okay.
not like there's no there's no person,
Right.
nobody's coming in Sunday into the room and saying, hey, in 2023 you have 5 flights and that's it,
Right.
right? And you got to make it work.
Right.
We try to do our best to stay true to making as competitive nationally a bracket that we can, eliminating the rematches in round one from the regular season, no conference matchups, right? In that round one, that's very important. And protecting our number one seeds throughout the bracketing process. And really, I think that's what's special about the Division III is we have the opportunity in the bracketing process to really set up a bracket if we can be creative enough and resourceful enough to really have that true bracket with a 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right.
If we really work hard enough at it. And we do such a good job preparing for that weekend. It doesn't just start on Sunday. We don't just like,
Right. That's not the
hey,
first time you flip
today,
up the laptop, right?
yeah, so today we're going to make the bracket. That starts way earlier in that week. It actually really starts when we start doing the top 16, because that's the first
Yeah.
time we really put in our head like, okay, these are the teams that we need to really hone in on. And then, this also comes into play, Bob. Another thing in Division III you have to remember is schools have to put in bids. I can't, as the chair or anybody on our committee, like I can't just call somebody and
And be
say,
like, hey, dude,
hey,
like your paperwork's not in, man.
yeah, like, I mean, we do our best as committee members to send out reminders. Hey, like the deadline is, February, like this year, the deadline is February 17th. And we're going to
Right.
be like really adamant, like deadline's February 17th. You need to put in your bids for the first and second rounds. You need to put in your bids for the third and fourth rounds. Like put it all in. I
Right.
mean, you have no idea what's going to happen. Like you'd rather have it in than not have it in, right?
Right.
Because you don't want a situation where you've put in 1 and 2 and then your team upsets somebody and you don't have a bid in for round 3 and 4 and you could have hosted.
Right.
That's a really awkward situation. And it's not like as a national committee member, we're gonna publicly say, well, this school
Yeah.
didn't put in a bid and that's
Right.
why they're not hosting. And so then it's like this awkward thing. Well, why aren't they hosting or what's happening? So like there's this whole process of putting in a bid that I
Right.
think the public doesn't really see. And so we also don't know what schools have available for those weekends or staffing or facility needs. And so that's a whole part of the process. And so if we don't have the bids, that's another
Can't consider them.
thing. So like that whole week prior, we're marking places off like, okay, this place, they haven't put in a bid, or this school hasn't put in a bid, or theirs is unfinished, or maybe they have hosted before and it wasn't great accommodations,
Right.
or it wasn't a great student athlete experience, or we received bad feedback or something like that. And so we don't want to go back to a certain place. And so there's all sorts of things that go into that
Right.
process of schools hosting. I mean, that's not going to happen on a whole lot of places, but there are some things that kind of go into that. And so, this year, I mean, I think I told our friend Dave McHugh, like, we're going to be like very vocal, like, put in your bids, put in your bids. And because we just don't want that. That's a really
Right.
horrible look for everybody involved. If,
You never know what's going to happen. Like
correct.
last year, I don't think anyone thought that Case Western Reserve was going to end up hosting a second weekend. And all of a sudden, crazy stuff happens. And you
Mhm.
look at the four teams and like, boom, there they are. Right. So you never know
Yeah.
when you might. Follow-up question on this is, when do you, at what point in the process are you told by the women's committee who their first weekend hosts are? Because it makes a huge difference to your whole deal. For
Yeah.
example, this year, here's four men's teams that are in the conversation. That's the women's teams are also doing great. Christopher Newport, Oshkosh, Rochester, and Wash U. At some point, someone has to tell you the men can't host the first weekend, so plan accordingly. When does that happen?
Yeah. So all that weekend, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, last year I was in constant communication with Megan. So like, I'm
Okay.
not sure if people know, like I did the bracket last year because I mean Mike was in the tournament. Mike was in consideration for the tournament. He couldn't do the bracket. So
Sounds
this,
like a pretty easy excuse to me. Just keep winning games and you don't have to make the bracket.
yeah, exactly. So he, and that's we had to talk through that, and we'll be in the I think this year obviously it'll be a lot more headache for me as the men's chair because it'll be our tournament that'll be impacted the most because our seeds that might be in contention to host won't be able to host, and so we'll have to pivot. And
And that's really tricky though, right? Like again, I try to make a like as the weeks go by or the days, I try to make a little top 16 where everyone's
yep,
matched up, and it makes a big difference if like Oshkosh, and I know we're not talking about specific resumes, but in the one I was doing today, I was like, okay, we need some hosts over here in the Illinois, Wisconsin area. So Wheaton's looking good, and Oshkosh and La Crosse. But if Oshkosh can't host and Wash U can't host, like it really gets tricky, is all I'm trying to say, right? Is
yeah,
like there's lots of moving parts that are happening very fast as those games play out.
it does. And so I mean we'll have um I mean, our room gets pretty crazy because we'll have plan A, B, C,
Yeah.
D, and then we're ripping things off walls and board, the big post-it note boards. And and if everything, here's our big board. And then if that one goes haywire, then we got to go to the next.
Yeah.
And
That is
then
tricky.
yeah, and so it'll, the not being able to host is definitely a tricky situation. And it's just something we're gonna have to deal with and think of on the fly. Um I will have the help this year. I've got two committee members traveling with me this year to
That's great.
Indianapolis. So that'll be good. I've got Rick Ferry, he's a veteran at this, and so he'll be in Indianapolis. And then we've got one of our new
That's cool.
members, Cam Fuller, so he's athletic director St. Norbert. So he's an administrator only. So I think that'll be good, especially moving forward with Luke being the chair and a coach. I think that'll be really great
Yeah.
for Cam to get that experience because I foresee Luke having successful teams. So I want to make sure that the committee is kind of set up for success
Right.
after I'm gone too, because this is something that I care deeply about.
I want to pivot off a couple things that you said
Yeah.
earlier because they were on the list as
Yeah.
well. So remind me of the your guidelines. I don't know if rule is too strong around avoiding rematches. So are you is that just a first round thing where
Yeah.
you're trying to avoid a game that has been played already, whether is it conference or non-conference? Is that right?
Correct. In the first round.
Is that the only round in which that is a thing?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
but that's a black and white. You won't, even if geography like made it really hard to not stay true to that, you would stay true to that.
Yep. Now the second round,
That's way harder. I
Yeah.
told as you get deeper, it's
Yeah.
impossible.
Can't guarantee that
Yeah,
second round.
like
And
Middlebury and Keene State,
yeah,
they could end up playing each other in some other round, but
yeah,
you would not have Middlebury and Keene State play each other in round one. And
yeah, yeah.
and I'm just saying it's tricky because people went out and did what you guys told them, and they played good games this year. And like
I know.
Fairmont Mud Scripps has played Mary Hardin Baylor, and Pomona Pitzer has played Mary Hardin Baylor, and didn't even Whitworth play Mary Hardin Baylor. So
But
like
yeah,
your
yeah,
ability to fly teams, like I'm telling you what, that's it's first of all, it's
yeah,
great that you do that,
yeah,
but it definitely impacts your bracket, right? Like
yeah,
it's a big deal.
yeah. And I mean, last year, because I was the site rep at the Emory location, and so they had a rematch round two, the Emory Wabash. So, but they didn't. We knew that was potential. And I think I heard it from Coach Brummett right away. But I think it worked out okay for him. And
Unfortunately, it did work
yeah,
out okay for him. I wish
yeah,
Emory would have won that game. I
yeah.
got to be
So
honest.
I
Just
know
saying, we could
Coach,
have another
Coach,
podcast on that.
yeah. Coach Zimmerman, Coach Zimmerman. I don't think I'm allowed back in Emory. I've been at Emory the last two where they've had really heartbreaking losses. In both of those tournaments. So he and I are good friends though. But he's like, I don't think I want you back here as a site rep if we host again, because I've been there for the last
Yeah.
two when they've had heartbreaking losses. So I might have
I,
to pass
yeah,
the
it's
pass the baton to somebody else to be the site reps.
I think
Just
that's a good call. I
yeah,
got another one for you based on something you said. You used the word protect our number one seed. Okay, so let me see what that means. The little mock thing I did today, again, we're just using this to have some kind of credible thing to throw in the conversation. But I believe that St. Thomas, Texas is getting very close to the conversation of being a top four team. And certainly you're not going to comment on that. You don't need to. But so the bracket I made, I had them as the four, and I built a little bracket with Oshkosh, Wheaton, and Mount Union. Now, I did that knowing that probably would mean that St. Thomas would have to fly to, like, let's just pick Wheaton. Like everyone else can get to Wheaton in a bus. So
Mhm.
I guess I wasn't protecting St. Thomas from a flight standpoint, but there's no way to protect that
Yeah.
if you're going now.
And
So tell me what that means. What does protect
yeah,
mean?
I mean that from a seating standpoint, like kind of stay true to the 1 to 16 type of seating standpoint. Unfortunately last year we had that same situation with Emory. They were kind of like the outlier location wise. So if they would have won that game against Wabash, we wouldn't have been able to give them that second round
They were coming to Bloomington either way.
because
The,
of the
the way that,
mileage.
yeah.
And and they knew that they would have had to fly because they would have been the one flight going in. So
So protect the number one seed then is not a flight thing. You're
seating.
going to make the
Seating.
seeds as they deserve to be seated. Now
Yeah.
they might get a terrible break and have to go fly somewhere, even as the number four overall seed. But that just is what it is, based
Yeah,
on the
unfortunately, that
rules.
is what it is. And you can look at that either way. A seat, is seating more important or is the flight more important?
Yeah.
Um, you might ask your friends in D2. I mean, I think they'd rather be seated,
Oh, they
right?
have a terrible bracket. It's terrible. I
Right. And
totally
so
agree.
and that's where, I spent, half my life in D2, and I love the model we have here in D3. That's why I'm so passionate about it, because if we can make, this not as close to a national bracket as we can, I mean, why wouldn't we do that? And that's what I mean by the protecting. And, if we can give our, I don't think at that point, it's just my opinion. I know, some people have other opinions, but if you have to go on a flight, I don't know if that's the worst thing in the world. I do think if you ask the other side of the world, I think they would rather have a regular seated bracket.
I'm with you on this one. Again, I'm a fan of a team that has gone on the road a lot in the tournament, and I personally think sometimes it's easier to go on the road
Yeah,
and feel like it's us
yeah,
against them and blah blah blah. So
yeah,
Let me ask this other question about bracketing. It's a good question. Do you desire to make a national bracket? I'm putting that in some air quotes. Or there's here's the better way to ask it. There's some moments where you can put two teams together that are really close geographically. And I'm just going to pick Middlebury and Keene State. I think they're like 100 miles apart. Middlebury and Keene State can be together, or Keene State can go way the heck down to Ashland, Virginia, let's just say. Do you have any consideration for like the proximity within, once you abide by the 500 rule thing? From there, do you have any regard for like, hey, they're pretty close, that's easy, let's do that?
Yeah, I think, that's kind of hard to answer too, just because like we also have to take in consideration all the AQs. Sometimes it's like there might be some AQs we haven't even thought of, right? I
Right.
mean, 'cause we're so focused on are the best teams in the country
Like
right
the
now.
top seeds, yeah.
Yeah, we're so focused on the best teams in the country. And like last year, there was some that kind of got thrown in the mix that I was like, oh, whoa, I kind of like we gotta have these AQs. And so, that's kind of what pushed some teams kind of a little bit further in travel than maybe they would have liked, just because we had to mix in some of the AQs that we had
Yeah,
never really talked about throughout the year or
sure.
throughout the process. And so, you know, I think what's different in this process is that, last year, everything kind of went chalk. There was no real like bid stealers or whatever. And so, there's so many AQs, and then there's so many teams that like we've never talked about the entire season.
Right.
And so they're not even on your radar. And so when you start putting them into the system, to the bracketing system, you're like, oh wow, they're like right here. So it's like,
Right.
let's try to fit them in somewhere,
Right.
and it's like, okay, then you have another, like when you were just talking about Keene State and Middlebury, that might be a situation where, okay, and also too, if they played each other, let's just move them out so they don't have to play each other again, right?
Right.
So that might be a perfect example of us trying to move one of those teams away,
But basically, you got to make the bracket under the rules, and maybe there might be a case where proximity might. But it sounds to me like the answer is like you're trying to build the right bracket
yeah,
using
yeah,
the seeds, and I put that in air quotes as well. Let me ask you this question, Sarah. Um, why the move? And I know this probably isn't a men's basketball thing. The
yeah,
move from the 600-mile rule back to the 500-mile rule. That makes, when I was doing my little bracketing work today, I realized it makes a big difference because I'm like using the software and I'm trying to get
yeah,
Hampton, Sydney to St. Joseph of Connecticut, and I couldn't
yeah.
do it. It makes a big difference. Why was that changed? Do you know why?
That was a Division III like budget. Um, they had it back in their budget to move us back to 500. And so, I think there was the hysteria when it was 600, like, oh my gosh, they would really put us in a bus 599.
Right.
And everybody's like, I can't believe they would do that to us. And we tried last year. I think we only sent one team. And again, sorry, it was Coach Brummett. I definitely heard that. Again, he and I became
I
fast
wish the
friends.
bus would have
Yeah.
broken down. I mean, I can't stress enough
Yeah.
what I wish would have
Yeah.
happened along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were the only ones that got sent um past, what was it, like 560 last year. And so and that was only because some of the AQs that we thought were going to win didn't, and then we had to rearrange some things. But that was strictly a Division III.
Division III made the rule. It was like they were doing us a solid. They were saying,
Like,
"Hey, we're going to help. We made you bus 600. Now we're going to help you out." And then
yeah,
it's kind of one of those weird things where you look at it,
yeah,
you're like, I kind of like the 600 to
yeah,
make a bracket. So
yeah, because you could go 510 or 515, and
makes a difference. It
yeah,
makes a difference in what you
because
can do.
like if you're at 510 or 515, it might just be easier to hop in the bus. Like you don't want to have,
Oh
like,
yeah,
sometimes flying is not the best. So
correct.
um, I mean, especially at some of our locations, I mean, you still might have to hop on a bus and travel another hour or an hour and a half. And so, You might
Yeah,
as well
like
just,
getting to Middlebury, someone pointed out to me, is
yeah,
like you got to go to this airport and get on.
yeah,
It's not like right next to a major airport.
yeah,
Another question for you, Sarah, and thanks for taking all these.
yeah.
This is one that I really feel strongly about. I want to get your take. All the regions except maybe one have 7 ranked teams. One of them has 6 ranked teams. Region 7 has the most teams. Region 7 has 48 teams, and it has 7. Now, I know this isn't part of the criteria, but Region 7 also is a very deep region. When you look at the resumes of the teams that are on the bubble, as I look at it, the Heidelberg, Trine, whoever, case maybe, boy, the bottom of those resumes there would be like middle of the pack in many other regions.
Mhm.
Should Region 7 have an 8th team based on ratios? Like should there be one more, or is this just how it's going to be, do you think?
Well, this is how it's going to be. It was capped at 7, except for in Region 2, it was at 6 because that's 20% because they don't have
Right.
as many teams. So that's just how it is across the board. That's what the championships committee, that was that. I'm just trying to give a political answer. That was their again, they thought they were helping us, right? So that's what they
Okay. I sense a very
blanket.
diplomatic answer is
Yeah,
ongoing currently. So, but
yeah.
I
So, but
mean,
I get it. Yeah, there is some where, yeah, that it. Yeah, I've done the math too. There's that one. I think Region 6. There's some, a little more teams. But yeah, it is kind of, yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain because, yeah, oh yeah, we're ranking 7 in all the regions except for Region 2 where it's only 20%, so we're doing 6. Just so you
right.
know too, how we evaluate teams, we always evaluate the next 2. So we might only publish 7, but we're ranking
You got 2
9.
more ready to roll.
We have the next 2 ready. We've evaluated them. We have compared them. We have made sure that that 8th team that we've got it right. We've evaluated the 9th team, that they are ready to go. We've evaluated them against the 8 and 9 team against those 7. So like we know who the 8 and 9 team are. Like I know who they are
Right.
right now for each region. And we've evaluated if there's a 10 ready to go, if there's 11 ready to go. And in some regions there's not. And in some regions there's a handful of teams that are like, okay, we got to keep our eye on these because they could, potentially, once we have
Right.
the rankings and get some wins, they could jump some teams, especially if, some of the teams we're evaluating don't have a lot of criteria
And I think
to
who it hurts
evaluate.
though is it doesn't hurt the Region 7 teams that don't get ranked, because to your point, if all those pool Cs get in, then you'll just go to the ones that are non-published and you'll go down the list. It hurts the teams that have played the teams that don't make the cut. So let's
Yeah.
just say I'm going to use
Yeah.
Trine. Let's
Yep.
say Trine is one of those secretly ranked teams. If you have a win over Trine, I mean, you literally could not get selected because you're missing an RRO win, and it's because
Against them.
Trine's in this crazy
Yeah.
deep region. So you know what I'm saying? Like, I
I
guess
know.
it is
Yeah.
what it is, but it seems a
Yeah.
little funky that region only has 7.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But I think we got to give it a
yeah,
full year to see how this goes, as opposed to ranking in some regions last year 10, where we had no business ranking 10.
yeah, yeah.
And
This is right.
so
This that was
because in
that was terrible. Yeah,
yeah, because in some of the regions, I mean, the bottom falls out real quick. So, um, I think
yeah,
we'll just see where this happy medium is, and
yeah.
we'll have to evaluate afterwards, and um, we'll give some feedback, and hopefully Luke can take it to the championships committee next year.
That'll
And
be his problem. I like
yes,
that.
yeah.
Totally. I
Yeah.
love that answer. It's his
Well, I've
problem.
already said
I'm behind that.
my next committee that I need to be on. I feel very passionate about. I gotta try to find a way to get on the championships committee.
That's right.
So, yeah, that you can have me back when I'm on the
Right.
championships committee.
Next question is around the communication between the women's basketball committee and the men's basketball committee. So I saw both you and Megan on Hoopsville. You guys were
Yep.
awesome, and it's clear that you guys are totally synced up. You talk regularly. You did
Yep.
last year. The question on this one is, there's a perception that men's basketball has been heavier historically on SOS and RROs, more so than the women's committee. And I'm just wondering, I guess my question is, do you feel like the two committees will have a common sense of how to evaluate the criteria, or will there continue to be kind of subtle differences between each committee, if you understand that question?
Yeah, I think because our committee has been very transparent for as long as I've been on the committee. We've always had transparent leadership. And over the past, 3 years, and especially with Megan's leadership, we have been meeting together. We've even had joint meetings with everybody to kind of go through. They've been able to ask us questions on how we evaluate, how we look at criteria. I think that you'll see a change. I hope there'll be a little bit more balance this year. I can't say I can't speak for Megan, but I think that we feel a little bit more comfortable that because of the work that we've done together, that there will be a little bit more balance in what we're doing. So I think that it just takes more conversation and just being more transparent in what we're doing. I mean, we're not hiding anything. I think that. We'll talk about everything that we're doing. I mean, I can't tell you where we had teams ranked this past week, but once we start, published rankings, we'll answer any question. We'll tell you why, and we'll be transparent to how we made decisions. And I think we've set a pretty good foundation on how we've done.
That's great. I could tell from Hoopsville that you guys work together really closely. Yeah. Another question was around RROs, and the question was the losses. So let's say someone is 4-3. We know about the 4, and I'm going to ask about the 4 in a second. What do you do with the 4 to differentiate? The losses, are RRO losses good? Are they bad? Are they neutral? Do you dig into the losses, and how would you explain what those mean to the process?
Yeah, I think there has to be a balance. That's a criteria that we're gonna evaluate. We're gonna look at what 4-3 is versus 5-1, right?
Right.
We're gonna actually click on that, open it up, and evaluate. We're not gonna just take it for face value, right? It's not just gonna pop up on the screen and say that someone's 4-3 and someone else is 5-1, and we're gonna take the 5-1 over that. If we're really going to evaluate who those 4-3 were against, who the 5-1 was against, and dig into that, because it matters. That matters. That might break a tie. That might help evaluate us evaluate teams when we're doing cross region. That is really going to be a factor when we're evaluating teams nationally. So we're gonna look at those. We're gonna open up that record in the RROs, and we're gonna look at it. It's not just gonna be a number, if that's
so
what you're asking.
You dig into all the RROs. You dig into the wins, the losses, and then the follow-up questions. It's kind of what are you able to dig into on the RROs? Is it are you looking to differentiate between an RRO win for one team versus the next? Not all RRO wins are the same. So what level do you go in to try to separate a great RRO win from a non-great one? Just talk me through what you do with those.
Yeah. For instance, if someone's got a 5-1 record and all those, if the 5 wins are against the 7 and the 6 and a 5, but someone else has a 4-3 record and their 4 wins are against number 1 in region 2 and number 2 in region 7. Right. And that will matter.
So you're looking at the wins and then where those teams might be in the regional rankings. That's one. Do you look at the time of that? Do you have your top 16? Could you say, hey, in our 16, they have a win over number 3, and these guys don't have anyone in the top 16. Is that a factor or no? Do you not
No,
use
it's
that?
just no, it's just it will tell us where that win was and where that team was ranked at the time.
Okay,
So
so you
and
okay.
that will, I mean, that matters. I mean, that will help us make decisions. I mean, that especially when the rest of the criteria is made really only for regional rankings, that right there gives
Yeah,
us a little bit of, kind of meat and potatoes to to really evaluate.
right.
So, we made decisions based on that last year. And I think that was really the only reason why you all didn't get 20 out of 20 last year on
I'll
our
tell you what happened. I'm going to
at
tell you exactly
largest.
what it was, and
Yeah,
this is for sure what it was. So
yeah,
DeSales at the
yeah,
last the regional rankings that we don't see,
yep,
those of us out there in random world, we don't see those. And what happens is when
yep,
those are done, what we didn't have is that DeSales picked up like
yep.
I think it was 5. I think they
Yeah,
went
they
from 2
they
to
picked up
7.
a lot. Yeah, they picked up a
If I
lot of.
would have seen 8 whatever the 8, 15,
Yeah,
5, 11, and 7, I'm 20 for
yeah,
20 and I'm celebrating, but I
yes,
don't have the final regional
yeah,
rankings.
yeah.
Is that kind of what they picked up a boatload, right?
They did. They picked him up in that last regional ranking, and
Man,
that was
killer.
the reason why you guys just went 19 for 20. So,
Hmm.
and that was it.
You
I
know what was
almost felt,
cruel is Mike Shower said that he was like driving in his car listening to us sort this out. Like he's
yeah,
like, "Come on, guys,
yeah,
you're 19 for 19. You got this. We're talking
yeah,
about the sales." Like that's.
yeah.
Would you agree that's sort of cruel that he did that to us? That's
Yeah, a
wrong.
little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit. I mean, what's cruel is that, I mean, I had to sit in there with him. I mean, we just went round and round and round, and like, I mean, I will tell you, I mean, that weekend it is so much. It's a lot. It's a lot, but it's so much fun. I'm definitely gonna miss him. I definitely, hopefully he's in the tournament. I mean, he should be in the tournament this year. So I won't be able to call him,
I'm
but
going to
yeah,
break some news that he's going to be in. I'm just
yeah,
breaking the
yeah,
news on the QCast.
yeah.
The
I'm
Wheat
gonna
and
break
Thunder,
that now. Yeah,
they're in.
yeah, but no, we there was a lot of like obvious things last year, but like we it was good. We had we pretty much had our 20, and he agreed on that, pretty soon, within the process. And it's a interesting process to see it out, and it's a lot better doing it live.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the men's basketball committee and our budget allows for us to go there live.
It sounds, yeah, it's, and it was, the takeaway for me is those final regional rankings, a lot can swing when you start like adding teams to the RROs. That changes
Yep.
resumes. 2 more questions for you,
Yeah.
and then I appreciate all of your time here.
Yeah.
This one, I think I'm going to try to answer, and then you just tell me if I have it right or wrong, because
Okay.
I've heard you answer this. The question was, can you ask her to generally talk about 2 different kinds of resumes? The resume where there's a low winning percentage, high SOS,
Yeah.
high RROs. Let's
Mhm.
call that last year's Rochester kind of resume versus the high winning percentage, low SOS, low RROs. I think I've heard you say a couple times here in the last couple weeks, like you can't, and maybe Luke said this too when I had him on. You have to have some balance in there, right? You can't have
Yeah.
played a terrible schedule and only have your winning percentage to lean on. You
Mhm.
also can't have played the toughest schedule in America and have a winning percentage of 0.500. This, what I just said, just rings very true to my heart right here. I know a team that has the toughest schedule, I think, in a 500. You can't expect that team to
Yeah.
get in. So is that the answer? The answer is there's got to be a balance. I don't know
Yeah.
what else there is to it. What would you add
There,
to that?
there has to be a balance. You're correct. And I believe Luke said you can't schedule everybody and not beat anybody, right? I think that's that, if I remember
Yeah.
when he was on the Q cast, and you can't beat everybody and not play anybody, right? Something like that is what he said. And that's right. You can't have, like, in the criteria, you can't just have like one outlier of criteria and not expect that, we're going to evaluate the rest of it or have another option.
Right.
So if you have an outlier in criteria such as this really high winning percentage, then we're going to bring in another option that has a lot of other criteria and we're going to evaluate it against yours. And that might be something that's not in your favor for that particular resume. So there has to be a balance. So if you have a high winning percentage and that's it, and that's the outlier that you have is the high winning percentage and the criteria. And then the next up is a team that's got a decent winning percentage, a high SOS. They've got some RRO, so they got some wins. They have common opponents. They got a nice record against common opponents, maybe against the teams that are already ranked in the region. That's that is a overall better resume. And so when we're comparing, we do a lot of these save and compares. That's what we call them. Save and compares. We'll save and compare those two teams. That resume is going to win the day anytime. And so if you have an outlier, and that's the other way around, if you got a high SOS and that's it, and you have a marginal resume everywhere else, we're going to bring up a next deserving resume. We're going to compare that. And so you can't expect to have an outlier in the, in criteria and us not compare the next up, right?
And that question was kind of around, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, but it was around Carnegie Mellon, because there's a chance that they could have a Rochester of last year resume where they're going to have under 700 but a crazy SOS and great RROs. They've already beaten Emory, and so that was the question was around that, and we're not here to talk specifics, but it's just a great topic.
Yeah, it also
different resumes.
It also depends on the region.
Right.
It also depends on the region. There are some teams that in some regions, you can have an outlier in a particular criteria, whether that be a winning percentage and just kind of marginal everything else, and that be okay in that region to be ranked. But in other regions, it's not going to be good enough because there are a lot of teams that are going to have more. And so that's very hard for those teams to probably see, or then not see their name in the rankings.
Right.
I would imagine.
Yeah, that's that again, I think it's a case by case. It depends who's on the board with them at the end. And you've been awesome with your time. Just the only other question I had is around the selection weekend. And just, you mentioned earlier, you got into that a little bit, but how do you guys prepare for that? What do you do that weekend? Those of us that are trying to picture how this works, talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll basically, like I said, we have a new liaison this year. His name is Scott Brown Jr. So there'll be 3 of us. I get there on Friday. So I'll set up the room with Scott Brown Jr. on Friday. We'll get all the TVs in there, all of our supplies. We go through a lot of paper, a lot of Post-its, a lot of things. And then we really Saturday, we set up, we call it our big boards. Every region, we have our big boards, our bubble teams for every region. We watch games or check off teams that are winning AQs. We'll watch everything, and we'll start to build our brackets. By that time, Rick and Cam will also be there to kind of help with that process. Jim Haney's in the room. He's getting his referees ready and seeing where we might have, our tournaments at. And so what I wanted to offer to you, Bob, if you're available that night, firsthand look, we want to get on a Zoom so you can see our there. Yes, if you want to get on, we could schedule.
I would love to.
Yeah, we can schedule a time on Saturday. You can get on. There'll be 3 of us, committee members, so you can see our room.
That'd be cool.
I think that is awesome. I think that's great for us to show the D3 world. I mean, we are doing it just like the Division I folks do. I mean,
That's
we've got,
much appreciated. I would love,
yeah,
let's do it. Yeah. Will you tell
yeah,
me how it works and what
yeah.
time to do it? But I think people would love to just
Yeah,
like
I think
see
they
all
would
that.
love to see like what we're doing. And we can, break it down. And if there's any last minute, if there's any like big upsets, we can talk about it throughout the day on Saturday. So maybe we could plan something for like late Saturday. But
That's
I think
great.
I think that'd be
Yeah.
great for the D3 world to kind of see how we do this process. So again, I think that's just the added thing. We appreciate I know our committee appreciates you and bringing stuff to the D3 community for men's basketball, and we'll like to showcase that. So
Well, hey, much appreciated. And I'm
see it.
all
Yeah,
in on that. And
yeah,
we'll talk about the details behind the
yeah,
scenes, but people will appreciate getting to see that.
yeah,
I know that you've got the top 16 reveal coming up. We talked about
yeah.
the rankings, and remind me the date. When does the top 16 come about? That's going to be on Hoopsville. And when is that? Do you know the date
That's
off the
on the
top?
16th.
16. So
Top
we get
16 on the 16th, and then everybody's like bids have to be on the 17th. So they've
it's
got.
awesome.
So like if you haven't had a bid, like it's almost like your final reminder, like, oh, I'm in the top 16. I better get my better get my bid in
And
within the next 24 hours,
that
right?
16, just I guess one final question I thought of that's
Yeah.
relevant. When you send out the top 16, that's truly going to be the 16 best resumes. You are not adjusting. Like to the little thing I did today on Twitter, I was adjusting for where I felt there had to be first round
Oh no.
pods. Your list is 1 to 16, and I guess where I'm going is if people see their name on that, it doesn't actually for sure mean that they're set up to host a first weekend. It
No,
just
no.
doesn't mean that,
Yeah.
right?
No. But it's almost a reminder, like, oh, I could
Right.
be in the mix here.
I need
So
to submit my stuff, but it doesn't mean like let's say that
yeah.
you're let's say that you're number 13 and you're like, gosh, I'm dealing here for
Hmm.
hosting. You still have to build a bracket with some geographical considerations.
Yeah.
And like you're 13 or 14, 15, 16, like there's teams at the bottom there that are absolutely not a lock to host. I mean, I'm
Correct.
not trying to overdo that, but that's a correct
Yeah.
statement, I think.
Correct. And especially with our since the women have priority this year as well,
Right.
we'll have to take that into consideration. And again, you just never know with some of the sites with once we get all those AQs, like I was talking about,
Right.
sometimes that'll get crazy because it's teams we've not talked about all year, and then we have to place them and
Right.
um
Yeah.
to
You're
see
like, I
what.
wasn't expecting to have to deal
Yeah,
with that. And all of a sudden here they are. Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Well, this has been awesome again, Sarah. I just thank you so much for going out of your way. I watched you and Megan on Hoopsville. That was
yeah,
incredible. Spending the time here today as well as
yeah,
back on November 1st. Final thoughts. You got a lot of this is like the greatest time of the year. You have tons of D3 fans
yeah.
that are going to check out the QCast. What would you like to say to everyone as we close out today?
Yeah, I would just remind everybody how awesome this Division 3 championship is. Our committee, just want to give them props. We have some of the greatest individuals. They dedicate their time. I mean, these are truly volunteer jobs, right? To really make this the championship that it is. We really focus on that student athlete experience, giving it that quality championship feel. And we can't wait to showcase again this level of basketball. You can talk about different divisions, but this is truly special. It is an honor to be the chair of this wonderful committee, and to showcase Division 3 basketball on a national level. And I can't wait in just a few short weeks to hand that trophy over to someone that's going to be so deserving in those final moments in Fort Wayne, and have all of you all there. And again, have our game on CBS. I think that is just
It's great.
amazing again for the game and for Division 3 basketball.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I know that the list of people that I know that's heading to Fort Wayne is
Yeah.
awesome. Like it's going to be all the
Yeah.
usual suspects are going to be there.
Yeah.
Sarah, thank you so much. And I guess I forgot to remind everyone too is in addition to being on the regional advisory committee, being the national chair, Sarah kind of has a day job as well. She's the athletic director at
Yeah,
Maryville College of Tennessee.
yeah,
So all this stuff we just talked about seems like it's her full-time job. She actually has another
yeah, I
full-time
actually have a
job. So
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
kudos to her for making this all work. Folks, that was the QCast season 3, episode 21. Sara Quatrocky, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.